Angela, New York, Educational Administrator. Brian walked into my office with a check in his hand and a bill in the other hand. The check was not made out. The bill was for $38,000. Brian was a student who had applied to the university 2 years ago, and at that time we had discussed in some ways his financial situation, and it was quite apparent to me at that time that financially college would be a burden on Brian. However, as an administrator, I have been informed that the financial status of students is not my concern, that my job is to ensure that they are at the university, and while they're at the university, they are a student and they are to be given all services and worked with. When Brian and I started talking about this $38,000 bill, one of the questions Brian put to me was, why did no one ever talk to me about how much this was going to cost? This has been an ethical dilemma for me for some time, knowing that students financially cannot afford the education, but also knowing that the education they're going to receive is going to be worth the money in the end. It comes down to the ends justify the means. The problem with Brian, as with many students, is that the finances became so overburdening that he was not able to complete his college education. Therefore, he was now burdened with a $38,000 bill and no college education to show for it. The check he brought in that was not made out, he could not afford to pay the $38,000 that he had put himself in debt and danger to pursue a college education. As an administrator at a university, this dilemma is one I face every single day, because my job requires that I don't talk about it. However, my heart tells me I should talk about it with students, and that there needs to be, at all colleges and all universities, a reality of students, a reality to students and their families of what the finances are going to be, how those finances are to be repaid, and what the burden of those finances will be while the student is in college. Brian looked at me this time with tears in his eyes and said, "They keep calling me. They won't leave me alone, and I don't know what to do." Again, my role is not as a financial counselor. The only advice I could give him was to call the student loan people, explain the situation, and work out a payment plan. Brian left very unhappy from my office and very sad. As I closed the door behind him, I too felt that I had disappointed Brian by not in the beginning letting him know that the finances were going to be so great and that there are other available options to education for kids like Brian. Ethically, it leaves you in a bad place because you want them to get a great education, but you also want students to be able to afford that great education. And it's just hard to determine if that's your role as an administrator, when it's your role as administrator, and how is that your role as someone in education.